Hey geeks, welcome to another exciting episode of Rockin The Code World with dotNetDave. I'm David McCarter. I'm glad you're back. We had a great show with my really good friend Carl Franklin, who I've known since the 90s last week. And this week, I have another really good friend from the late 90s. Used to hang out with Rocky Lhotka. Um, uh, as my I'm screwing up already as my guest today. And we were just talking about the bus trips we used to take at conferences and things, that these conferences that Rocky and Carl and I used to go to. And so that's kind of where I met Rocky, and we've known each other ever since. And I follow him and what he's doing, and I hope you'll stay and watch the show. And don't forget to ask questions. This is your show. It's not mine. It's yours. And so you need to ask questions. Can you switch to the slides, Simon? Simon, something happened? Look here. Oh, I can't switch because I haven't shared. Okay, hold on. There you go. Well, I guess if I remember to share the slides, that works, right? Anyway, Rocky's my great guest today, and I'm really excited to have him on the show in just a couple minutes. And it's show number 82. We're getting close to 100, Simon. I'm getting excited about the 100th show. We should do something special, I think. We'll see. All right, news. Well, Carl Franklin, who was my guest last week, Carl and I are going to be at the Copenhagen Developers Festival, the very first one that NDC Conferences is bringing to the world in Denmark next in August. So I'm really excited about that. So if you live in that area, I hope you come see us. I was actually looking at the speaker list this morning, and man, there's a lot of really great speakers there, including Mads Torgersen, who's been on the show multiple times too. You know, he's the architect of C#. He's going to be there too. And I'm excited because it'll be the first time I'm able to see Mads and Carl and a couple of my other friends since before COVID started. So I'm really excited to do that. And I think Mads and I have plans to go around Copenhagen together, and maybe with some other people too, kind of like we did in 2018 in India. That was a really memorable time when Mads and I spent 2 days touring Delhi and Old Delhi in 2018. That was really fun. So if you live in the area, go sign up now and come see me there. Right now, that's the only place I'm speaking in person this year. I'm still waiting to hear from about 4 other conferences, so we'll see. But that's the only place I'm speaking in person this year. All right, and I want to promote my new book on code performance, Rock Your Code, Code and App Performance for Microsoft.NET. I worked most of last year on this book, and I learned a lot writing this book, and I know you will learn a lot reading the book, and you will be surprised on some of the performance things you will see, and some of the ways you've been doing things for a really long time. You just might find out might not be the most performant thing. And so I hope you go check out the book, available on Amazon right now and wherever Amazon is sold throughout the world. So hope you do that. All right, I want to bring on Rocky. Rocky is a VP of strategy at Xpirit USA. He's the creator of the widely used CSLA .NET open source framework. It's been around a long time. Author of numerous books. He regularly speaks at conferences around the world. And Rocky is a member of the Microsoft Regional Director and MVP programs. Someday, maybe I'll be a regional director. Welcome, Rocky.
Hey, good to see you. Glad to be here.
Yeah, good to see you too, man. How's everything been going?
You know, life is good. It's just keeping busy with work things and with programming things, and I've had some opportunity to get out fishing and enjoying the outside, so it's a great mix.
Man, I don't think I've been fishing since I was in my 30s, maybe. I don't know, 20s. My gosh. Yeah, because
Oh, yeah. Well,
you know,
living in Minnesota, fishing is a big part of life here. At least,
because
well, for me, it is.
you guys have a ton of lakes up there, right?
We're famous for our lakes. Yep.
Right,
And,
right.
and so, yes, in fact, my dad and I were out fishing yesterday, and we got a whole bunch of sunfish and had a great time.
Wow. Yeah. But most of the fishing around here, of course, is out in the ocean, and
Sure. Yep.
it's something I've never done. I've always wanted to do the deep sea fishing, but never got around to doing it.
Well,
But huh?
you should though.
Yeah, I know. I got
I've
it.
had the opportunity a couple times on the Pacific side and then in the Gulf. And I was at a user group in Sarasota a few years ago, and
Mm,
one of the user group members had a boat, and so we went out in Tampa Bay, and that was fantastic.
yeah. I remember in 2016 I was in uh, Georgia. Was it Georgia? I think, and one of my ex coworkers lives there, and he actually lives on the lake,
Oh,
and his backyard backs up to the lake, and he's got a boat, and we went boating on the lake, and that was really fun. Yeah, it's and I took a beautiful picture you guys can find on my photography site from when I was on the lake with him, and yeah, I miss doing that. I need to do more of that stuff. I should contact my friend here, and we should go do because we're both looking for a job, so we have plenty of free time to go fishing now, right? So you made it through. Your family made it through COVID, okay?
for the most part, yeah.
Yeah,
We had definitely different people had it at different points, and my wife had got it, and then it took many months to recover. But so yeah, it was rough, but for the most
yeah.
part, we came through.
Well, I hope you don't get any of that long-term stuff I've been hearing about. That's like the one of the biggest reasons I didn't want to get it, and I haven't got it.
Mm,
Was I'm sure I could probably get over the actual virus, but the long-term thing is what I kind of was worried about.
That's the scariest part, I think,
Yeah,
especially now that we seem to have better treatments to. Um, well, although a lot of people still die every day from it, so I don't
yeah,
know.
yeah.
But
I know. And now they're coming up. I heard on NPR the other day that they're dropping. They're in meetings right now to come up with a new booster, and it's not going to be based on the old ones. They're kind of abandoning the old versions of COVID because I think they're pretty much dead and gone. It's the new variants that are going around, and so they're trying to figure out how they're going to target that and maybe come out with a booster in the fall. So that's the latest thing I heard.
well,
Yeah,
I,
I
yeah.
I think we're going to be on kind of like like the flu, right? Get a flu shot every year, get a COVID booster every year, right?
Yeah, I think you're right, and
Yeah,
I hope it becomes more effective as time goes on, so we
yeah.
get it, under complete control. But keep our fingers crossed.
Well, as long as it's more effective than the flu shot. It's the
Well,
flu
yeah,
shot is based on old stuff that it's probably not going around too much anymore. So, but it does help. I have to get it. My doctor tells me to get it.
mhm.
So, what do you want to talk about first? You got three things that look really cool to talk about. And before you start talking, everybody make sure you ask questions for Rocky. And Simon, can you get a post to my book on Amazon and post it for me? Someone's asking. So anyway, so what do you want to talk about first?
Well, I think it's all kind of tied together, at least in my mind. I have really been focused a lot on Blazor for the last, couple of years, I guess.
Hmm.
I was and still am very cloud focused, Kubernetes and containers and that sort of thing. Um, but the churn in that space burns a person out. At least it burned me out.
Yeah.
And and not like Blazor isn't changing on a regular basis too. It's not nearly as crazy, I think it's funny, right? Because the web um, was legendary for, think of a noun, put JS after it, and you've got Java, right? JavaScript framework,
Right.
and the churn was crazy,
Yeah.
and the web has really matured a lot in the last
Mm.
decade. And I think it still has a long way to go in some ways, but it's the web today is not like it used to be,
No.
um, and I think Blazor benefits from that, right? In that the rate the rate of change is still high on the web and therefore in Blazor, but it's not like we're completely abandoning concepts and coming up with new ones, right?
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Um, and but for me, I think I look at Blazor and I look at WebAssembly. WebAssembly is way bigger than Blazor, but one of the things that draws me to Blazor is the fact that it can target WebAssembly.
Yeah. For
And
native stuff. Yeah.
yeah, for client side,
Hmm.
you know, and like I say, I think WebAssembly is way bigger because it's also rapidly becoming a server side technology.
Hmm.
And I think personally, I think what we'll see over the next number of years as all of this stuff matures is that most of our software, and not just in the .NET world, just collectively, whether it be Go, Rust, Java, C Sharp, most of our software will probably end up compiling to WebAssembly to run on the server and very often on the client as well.
Yeah.
So it's it's exciting.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. I think, was it Carl last week said that, like the WebAssembly works different on, I forgot if he said it was like iOS or where you get access to everything without even doing much of it work, or I don't know, maybe you experience that. Have you done like a, used Blazor or anything like that within, like a iOS or some other,
Mhm.
OS framework?
I have. In fact, one of the projects that I am working on through Humanitarian Toolbox
Hmm.
and Missing Children Minnesota is a kids ID kit app that
Hmm.
is intended to run on Android and iOS.
Hmm.
And I'm building it using a Maui hybrid technology. So it's a Blazor app, but it's hosted in Maui so that it
Yeah.
becomes that way it can actually go into the Apple and Google stores. Uh,
Right. Right.
and and I'm choosing to do this because I actually have gotten to the point with Blazor where I'm more productive using that than I am with XAML,
Hmm.
which and I am one of the people that when WPF came out, I invested heavily in learning XAML, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, but that's part and for the longest time, I'm like, you know, WPF or XAML is the way to go because where HTML uh, really was designed for one purpose
Hmm.
originally, and has been morphed into
Yeah.
something completely different,
Yes.
and it's not what you'd call engineered, right? It's like we,
Right.
we accidentally got here, whereas XAML was engineered, and I'm like,
Hmm.
man, XAML is so much better, but it doesn't matter if it's better. For folks old enough to remember the VHS versus Betamax
Yeah. Oh,
analogy, um,
I
this is
remember it died pretty quick.
it's the same thing though, because if I want to do something like a clever animation or something like that with XAML, I'm gonna have to figure it out from scratch because you
Yeah.
can Google all you want, but you probably won't find anything. But if you want to do anything in HTML or CSS, you can just go out and search for it, and you'll find numerous examples that you can you learn from and cobble together your own, and um, it's just infinitely better.
Yeah.
Even though the technology might not be as good, it doesn't matter if at the end of the day I'm more productive using HTML and uh, and of course and then the reason I love Blazor is I can do all the HTML stuff and I can do it with C#.
Yeah, yeah, that's the best part about Blazor is you don't have to necessarily use JavaScript, right? Which I kind of avoid if I can, right? But going back to XAML and WPF a little bit, when I was still teaching when that first came out at the university, and I would talk about it in my class, and the way I talked about it was, I think one of the concepts that I really liked about XAML and WPF was before then, right? We had a difficult time bringing in designers into our world, right? And we always used to make a joke, you probably did too, that I can always tell a UI developed by a programmer because it's gray and ugly and and all that stuff. We're not graphic designers by practice usually. I mean, I do it, but I don't think most people do. But so that XAML and what was that app they came out with that allowed you to do XAML without Visual Studio? I keep forgetting.
Blend.
A Blend, right?
Mm-hmm.
So they came out with Blend, so the designers could use Blend, right? Give us the XAML, and then we would just hook up code to it, right?
Right.
And I thought that was a brilliant idea, right? Because that allowed the designers to kind of be part of the equation now. And I'm not sure if the other technologies since then really allow that. I'm not really sure. I don't know what you think.
Well, I think if you design things correctly, I guess is the right way to say it. You can certainly do that with HTML, CSS, right?
Sure.
And whether that be with Angular or Blazor, if you go into it knowing that you're going to have that, the designers working on one aspect and the coders working on a different aspect. I do think though that at least my understanding of UX design has certainly evolved over the years because I have had the privilege of working with some really good UX folks. And so, yeah, I did used to tell those jokes. But I've kind of stopped because there's a difference between a UX designer and a graphic designer.
Yeah.
And a UX designer is actually storyboarding with the user, and they've got a lot of overlap with business analysts and understanding what the user is trying to accomplish and coming up with a clean, clear, and understandable way to do that from a
Right.
user experience perspective,
Right.
having nothing to do with graphic design at all. And we conflate the two. And I guilty, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. But I don't anymore. And part of it is I actually believe I'm a pretty good UX designer. I have zero graphic design skills, right? But I have built over my career a lot of applications that are heads down data entry requiring optimized keystrokes and mouse movements and I actually am pretty good at doing that. Like, the stuff might look like crap.
Yeah.
But it's going to work really, really well.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm generally pretty good too, not only because I have I've been doing graphics and video since I've been in middle school, really. But, one thing that I started doing even before I became a full-time programmer was I was really good, and it's harder now that I've been doing this all dang long now, but I was really good at putting myself in the user's shoes, right? Because, one of the reasons, we all complain about, or people complain about, software design is because, the programmers wrote the user experience, right?
Right.
And they wrote it to themselves, right? Who know how to use the program, right? And not necessarily the user, right? And so that's where a lot of those issues come into play, is where programmers generally have a hard time doing that, right? Putting themselves in the user's shoes, right? And even I've worked at companies where I would spend a whole day with the users, right? Just asking questions and watching their workflow and things like that, right?
Hmm.
And at some companies, I demanded that, right? And even I tell this one story, which is in one of my books or something, where actually this company right up the street from me, that's why I live where I do, is, I told them I wanted to spend a day with the users, and they said no. And the next day I started looking for a new job, right? Because I'm going, how can I write a program, that the users will love and all that stuff if I don't get to talk to them, right? And understand what their needs are. So
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
yeah.
And I think, and don't get me wrong, I think having attractive visuals and having a good color palette and all those
Oh
things
yeah.
are really important.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm not good at any of those.
Yeah.
Um, but I have worked with graphic designers that where you figure out who's in which spot, right? You know what I mean? It's like, yes, you're going to be great at creating all the graphics, and I and my team are going to be great at, like you said, talking to the user, figuring out that. I've also worked with UX folks that spent massive amounts of time with the users,
Mhm.
going through their overall, not just the user, not just what we think of as the UX, but their actual, like, what do they do every day and how do they
Mhm.
do it, and how could we optimize their workflow.
Right.
um and oh, that is so much fun.
Yes.
Having and but I agree with you too, boy. I have worked in a couple of cases where the consulting in particular, where the customer said, no, 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 you can't talk to our end users.
Yeah.
So you understand exactly what they do every day, and they're like, well, no, I've never actually done their job. Like,
Yeah.
we how are we going to be successful here, right?
Yeah.
There's just no path to success.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that reminds me of, like, even one of my first beginner jobs, or maybe intermediate jobs. This would be in the late '90s sometime. I worked briefly for a company, and I was designing a brand new ticketing system for Edwards movie theaters, and who is all over the country, and uh, and the owner of the company kept telling me, no, this is the way they want it, this is the way they need it, blah blah blah. This is the way you should, you do the user experience, right? Because I know better, right? and
Mm,
i and
yep.
so finally, when I got to like a beta stage, right, I finally convinced him to let me go and spend an afternoon at the closest Edwards theater, right? And I took my system down there and I sat right next to the ticketing person, right?
Hmm.
And while she was selling tickets, I would kind of be mimicking what she was doing, to making sure that, you know, and I found out that he was all full of, what.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Everything he told me was wrong, you know, and I had to redesign everything because he never spent any time with the users because it just didn't match, right?
Yeah, and if we can go on a tangent here, I think folks that have been in the industry long enough at some point start to, well, maybe not everybody, but a lot of people do. I've talked to so many people that have the same idea that, here I am, 10, 20, 30 years later in my career. And although the technology and the tools that I use are completely different in a
Hmm.
lot of ways, um, most of the software that I end up being involved in creating today is fundamentally the same software from 30 years ago,
Hmm.
right? There's a data store and
Right.
there's a user experience. The user's typing stuff in. Um, the challenges that we face come largely from the same places that they always have, which is
Hmm.
how do we communicate with the end user? How do we get clear requirements? How do we establish real success criteria? And then we just keep churning our technology underneath, which
Right.
adds a whole bunch of new challenges that, when I wake up on the wrong side of the bed some days. I'm like, we waste so much time reinventing the same crap over and over
Oh,
again.
I know. I know.
Um,
Drives me crazy.
but then when I wake up on the right side of the bed, I think, it it the what we are, if we do it right, if we get our process right and the communication with our end users right, and the tools and technologies that we have today allow us to create things that we really couldn't have cost effectively or maybe even at
No,
all created 20 or 30 years ago. And
no,
so
no.
so I try to wake up on that side of the bed. That makes life a whole lot more fun.
Yeah. And I don't know if you do this, but when I'm with just even like my doctors or my dentist or something like that, and or even at the grocery store and they're using the software, right? I ask
Mhm.
them questions. Is it easy to use? And they show it to me sometimes and they go, no, we hate it. It's so hard to use. And I'm sitting there going, yeah, because no one talked to you. That's why it's hard to use, right? If you guys are complaining about it and bitching about this really expensive software you're using, right? Then that means no one talked to you. And it makes me sad that it continues to happen, right? After
Yeah.
all these years.
But I also think, especially when you look at scenarios like that,
Mhm.
there's another aspect to this that is, for better or worse, I've spent an awful lot of time in the U.S. healthcare system as a patient for
Mm.
over quite a few years, and um, basically Epic, and there's a couple big software packages that everybody uses,
Mhm.
and but then you stop and you think about that, and you think that software like that, and it's the same with like SAP and all these things, that those packages are trying to be something to everybody.
Right.
And so that means that they're what are they, a 70% match, 60% match
Yeah,
to any particular organization's requirements.
sure.
And they tend to be slow and clunky because
Mhm.
um, the screen that you see um, at your organization is completely reconfigured for some other
Somebody
organization.
else, right. They have
And
feature flags and all that.
yep,
Yeah.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. And I'm not necessarily saying this is bad, but it definitely comes with a huge cost.
It does.
And in
Performance.
terms of performance,
Yeah.
usability,
Mhm.
complexity,
Right.
and so economically, there's a lot of drivers as to why software gets built that way. But this is also throughout my career one of the reasons that I've always argued. Uh, for any given organization, uh, you exist because you're doing something unique or special.
Mhm. Right.
Maybe you're doing something nobody else is doing, or you're doing something in a cheaper way or a much higher quality way, or whatever it is. And parts of your business or your whatever you do um, are routine, right? Like
Mhm.
accounting is probably never a differentiator.
Yeah.
And so buying off the shelf software and customize, or not customizing but configuring it to meet your needs, yeah, go for it.
Yeah.
But if the software is serving what is really your secret sauce, um, the odds of you being able to find off the shelf software that do your unique thing is near zero,
Yeah.
because if your thing is actually unique, then nobody else built software for it, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
And so then you should probably look at building literally custom software for yourself, for your organization, because it's going to directly meet your needs, and it's going to amplify whatever it is that is your secret sauce.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's kind of what happened to me when I was the part of the original development department for proflowers.com.
Hmm.
And back in the internet bubble days, we were the number 2 flower website, in America. And we were the first company to actually ship flowers directly from the grower to the consumer. right? Bypassing the flower shop, right? So that's why, you know, flowers from Pro Flowers would last sometimes up to 2 weeks, and you'll never get that from flowers you buy in the grocery store or flower shop, because they've been dead, especially the grocery store. Never buy on Mother's Day, don't buy flowers in the grocery store, please, because they're just about completely dead by the time they get to the grocery store, because the grocery stores are the last ones to get them. And so because we were doing something new and innovative that's never been done before, then I had to, you know, create a system for the growers that didn't exist, right? And that ended up becoming patented. So I'm a patent inventor because of that system, because yeah, we were doing something that no one's done before. So yeah, we couldn't buy anything off the shelf to really do what we were doing, right? You're right.
So I suppose we should probably loop back to our plan topic, although this, I think, has been a good conversation.
Yeah. I like, well, and I also like talking about this because I always want to make sure people know that, you know, you need to architect and do this stuff before you sit down and start coding, right? I mean, that's the best success you're going to get out of a program is spending time with the users, doing good architecture, right? You know, doing focus groups or whatever you need to do, right? Before you even sit down to do anything. Because if you do it at the end of the project, you know how painful and expensive that's going to be to change everything.
Oh yeah, well, it's too late. I mean, at
Yeah.
that point, it pretty much can't happen.
Yeah, exactly. And now you're just left with a big pile of, you know. So I do want to get to Nicholas is asking a bunch of questions. He asked, "What's the designer for Blazor?" What's your answer to that?
I think whatever web design tool makes you happy. A lot of folks, including me, use VS Code.
Yeah.
You know, just it has good HTML, CSS tools. I do use Visual Studio itself somewhat. Well, I shouldn't say it. I use Visual Studio a lot.
Yeah, me too.
Because I'm highly productive in it.
Yeah.
But an awful lot of people use VS Code. You know, at the end of the day, you know, if you, like me, you come from like the Windows Forms and you too, right? The old VB days, you know, where we had, you know, graphical designers. Rapid application development was the term.
Yeah,
right?
I miss those.
That workflow really doesn't exist in the web world. And instead the web world is largely, you know, tweak HTML, hit F5 to refresh the browser, see what happened.
Yeah.
And you know, but hot reload in Visual Studio starts to help within I think very serious bounds. The promise of the whole hot reload thing sounds great, but in practice, it's rare that I'm able to
Get
just
it to
hot
work.
reload anything.
Yeah.
But if I'm just doing HTML, CSS tweaking, actually, it works pretty good.
Oh yeah.
You know, and
that
like,
doesn't have to be compiled.
yeah, right. And I think that's maybe kind of the point of the question, though, is if I'm doing, you know, iterative, like just trying to get the UX to look and work well. You know, and the other trick along with that, with Blazor in particular, is the hot reload, debugging, all of the capabilities that are in the tools with Blazor work best with Blazor Server.
Yeah.
You know, because there are three ways that, well, there's more than three, but three general ways that you use Blazor, right? Blazor Server, Blazor with WebAssembly running in the browser, and then Blazor hosted in Maui.
Right. And now they're coming out with hybrid or something like that, right?
Well, that's the hybrid, the Maui hybrid. Yep.
Oh, the Maui is the hybrid. Yeah. Okay.
Yep. Right. And but also the debugging kind of works in that order. The server side debugging is fantastic, and so and then the WebAssembly debugging has gotten much better. But the Maui debugging, there's so many moving parts by the time that you're debugging Maui, debugging Blazor, running on a phone. It's just, the complexity is out of control.
Yeah.
And so when I'm building for WebAssembly or for Maui, and what I will usually do is actually take all of the Blazor code out of the project and put it into a DLL, or a Razor component DLL is what it's called.
Mm.
And that way I can easily host it in a temporary, even if I'm never going to deploy with server-side Blazor, I can host it in server-side Blazor during development, because that makes
Mm.
my what Microsoft calls the inner loop, right? Where you're just like, tweak a little thing, hit F5, tweak a little thing, hit F5.
Yeah.
It's so much more productive. Um, and still, I might have to do some tweaking and debugging when I actually deploy it into the Maui hybrid or actually run it in WebAssembly. But most of the heavy lifting gets done in a much more productive, uh, rich tool environment. Uh,
Yeah.
that's a long answer to a what seems like a short question.
No, it's a really good answer, actually. And I do want to make sure we talked about CSLA, but I want to make sure we get to Nicholas's other question. Users will always come up with ways to do things that developer never considered. Does that mean the users are right? What's your answer to that?
You know, unlike the old adage of the customer is always right, the users are not always right,
Yeah.
uh, but the developers are not always right either.
No, no.
And that I think is, you got to really be careful there to have a dialogue with the customer or the end user and say, why is it that you think it should be this way?
Right,
And they might have a great answer, or they might not realize what the technology could be doing for them.
right, right.
Right. So sometimes the answer is, yeah, the user understands what they do day to day way better
Mhm.
than we ever will.
Oh, yeah.
And so, yeah, sometimes they're right. Sometimes they're like, we've been doing it this way. Our whole business process is this way. And you're like, well, why is that? And they're like, well, because that's how
Mhm.
the system works.
It's always been done that way,
Yep,
right?
yep,
Yeah.
yep. Or that's how the old software works, right? Or whatever it
Yeah,
is. And it's like,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But we're creating new software now.
Right, right,
That super awkward thing you're doing, we could in fact replace that with a much better way of thinking about it.
right.
And this is not a developer thing, though. That I think maybe is the key word I'm going to pick out of this question. Is, again, that comes back to the user, the UX design, or a business analyst, or it's that skill set where you're talking the user through their problem space, their workflow, and saying, well, how could we optimize what you do
Mhm.
in your day-to-day life, by making the software better. And
Right.
yeah.
And that's, when I talk about this and I write about this too, is, like, for example, with the what I developed for Pro Flowers, right? When I spent a day with, the user, with the grower, and not only with the people who package the flowers, but also the manager and the warehouse and everybody else I could talk to, right? I spent the entire time just understanding their process of getting the flowers from the greenhouses into the FedEx truck, right? That was my job. Not once did I ask them about software or where
Hmm.
they want things placed or anything. That's my job, right? My job is to take their workflow and apply that to what I know to make their life better, right? Because most users you talk to don't know the first thing about software. And
Right.
I've heard UX people ask users, should it be this place or should it be, asking them questions they probably shouldn't be asking them, right? Because that's our job to figure out, not the user's job.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah,
Again, I do think it's collaborative.
sure. Yeah, yeah,
Well, actually, at many levels it should be collaborative.
yes,
But
yes,
but 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 you're right. I mean, they bring expertise about the problem domain that we don't have,
right.
and we bring expertise about our problem domains that they don't have. And this is where, uh, and I in my career have been fortunate. I've had a couple, especially early on, a couple different mentors and bosses, but they were really like, to be successful, to solve this problem, you're going to have to empathize with the user. You're going to have to
Mhm.
understand the user. A lot of things that you've been saying, uh, and not every developer or programmer gets that coaching, right?
Mhm.
And so, and not everybody wants to do it either, and I understand that.
That's true. Yeah.
But I do think that the most successful people in our industry are the ones that do, in fact, um, go through the work. And when I was first starting, when I was in my 20s, um, I was an impatient person. Like the last thing I want to do is spend a bunch of time talking to non-technical people about non-technical stuff, right? And
Mhm.
um, luckily, I matured out of that.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah.
Otherwise, my career would have gone a completely different direction, I'm sure.
Yeah. 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 So those of you out there, don't be afraid to talk to the users, right? I know a lot of developers, like you said, don't want to do that, and that's okay. Uh, but uh, but like you said, to really deliver something the users love, I think they do need to understand what the users are experiencing in their whatever they're trying to solve with the software, right? So let's talk about CSLA and what's going on with that. And I think I also saw something on your blog this morning about ChatGPT, and so maybe we could talk a little bit about that too. But what's going on with CSLA these days?
CSLA, we just came out with version 7.
Hmm.
Uh, so that gives full support for .NET 7 and all the new features in Maui and Blazor. And still support, of course, ASP MVC and Razor Pages and all the way back to Windows Forms, actually. And uh, we're still supporting all the way back as far as .NET 4.6.2.
Hmm. Hmm.
Although I don't know, I keep supporting stuff as long as I can, basically,
Yeah, yeah.
without it being too onerous. But at some point, we'll drop support for everything except 4.8
Hmm.
and current. But yeah, I tell you, I can't express how excited I am uh, about the way CSLA and Blazor interact. Uh,
Hmm.
you know, 'Cause CSLA at the end of the day, it provides a home for business logic, and we've got all these UX frameworks, Windows Forms, WPF, Blazor, whatever, and we've got all these data access frameworks, Entity Framework and
Hmm.
Dapper, and all sorts of. And but the third pillar for any real application is that you have to have business logic,
Right, right.
and somehow you got like design patterns like MVC that say, here's how you do your view, and here's how you do your model, here's how you do your controller. None of those are places that you're supposed to put business logic.
Yeah, that's
And
true.
it's just like, well, thank you very much, but where do I put my business logic, right?
Right, right.
Um, and that's really what CSLA is all about. It says, yeah, okay, let's figure out a way to have a rules engine and create a domain object, domain a model that encapsulates your business logic, and then hopefully make it easy to connect that business model to any of the UI technologies that are out there, and make it easy to persist the data in and out of your domain model using any of the data access technologies that are out there.
Uh,
And
Hold on
yeah,
just a sec. Simon, can you put a link up for CSLA? I think there might be something in the notes about it. Nicholas is asking. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, that's fantastic. CSLANet.com.
Yep, there you go.
And yeah, and so it's been around for a long time, over 25 years that I've been
Yeah.
working on it, and so it's one of the oldest Microsoft .NET, or sorry, not just .NET, one of the oldest Microsoft open source projects in existence, because it
Yeah.
started in 96, 97, something like that.
Yeah,
And
that's older than mine. I started mine in .NET 2, whenever that was.
oh yeah, this
Yeah.
this its origin actually, its origin was with COM
Mm,
before .NET showed
the
up.
old
So
com days.
yeah, right. Um,
um,
but
does
yeah.
go? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say. So one of the um, in a sense, the heyday of CSLA was with Windows Forms and WPF, and for better or worse, Silverlight, um, because it allows one of the features of CSLA is that your rules can run on the server and or run on the client.
Hmm,
And so sometimes you want your business rules to run on the client to give the user a real immediate interactive experience. Sometimes you need them to run on the server because they need access to massive amounts of data or other
sure.
server resources.
Sure.
And sometimes you want them to run on both because you want it to run on the client to give the user that great experience, but then you don't trust the client. So you
Right.
rerun the rules on the server.
Rerun it. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And so CSLA does those scenarios. And but it only works on the client if .NET runs on the client.
Yeah.
And so for the last, maybe decade, where most of our software has been written, client is JavaScript and the server is .NET, um, you know, CSLA only worked on the server, which is fine.
Hmm.
But now, oh man, you get Blazor
Hmm.
with WebAssembly. So now we're
Hmm.
saying, okay, yes, you can in fact run your business logic on the client device in the
Hmm.
user's browser, give them that rich interactive experience, take a lot of computing load off the server, therefore increasing scalability and decreasing your cost because you
Right.
have to have less servers.
Right.
And you can still rerun the code on the server if you don't trust the client, which you
Right.
probably don't.
You should never trust the client.
Right, right.
Not
Um,
the person, the
no,
client,
yeah, yeah.
the client framework.
Physical device, right,
The
right.
physical device, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, does it also two questions I have. Does it support built-in caching or anything automatically? Or not automatically, but can you configure caching for like the data stores and things like that?
Well, there's two ways to answer that, and so CSLA itself does not do caching,
Okay.
um, but at the data layer, you can definitely do caching.
Yeah.
If you are using some sort of uh, data access technology that allows caching. And if you're building, especially if you're building a smart client deployment where it's WPF or Blazor WebAssembly, um, then CSLA has hooks where you can do caching of. Well, let's suppose that you have a bunch of read-only data that's used to populate uh, combo boxes on a
Yeah.
complex
Yeah.
screen.
That's kind of what I was thinking about. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and so that stuff, there are hooks that make it easy for you to cache that type of information on the client and keep it in memory.
Yeah. Yeah. Because that's, you and I know that, you need to decrease the amount of round trips you do with the server, right?
Mhm.
Because that's a huge performance killer, and so the more caching you can do on the client side, whatever that client side is, the better experience your users are going to have, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you couple that with CSLA supports this concept of a unit of work pattern, and
Mm,
so again to minimize round trips. And so if you know that you've got like your order entry screen for your flowers site or whatever,
mm.
and you've got 20 different drop downs. Uh, you can make one unit of work request to the server, load all 20 of those things and return
Oh,
it once, and then
yes.
cache them. So then and these are implementation. There's pros and cons to all these things, right?
Sure. Sure.
But if your typical user scenario is that they come in the morning, they load up the order entry screen, and then it sits open, for the whole day.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's probably worth going one time to the server, loading all that, caching it in memory on the client, and and then maybe you've got a cache refresh check, in case every
Sure.
so often. Yeah,
Right.
that becomes but implementation details. But yes,
Yeah.
that's
But even once an hour would be a lot better than every time, right?
yes, exactly right. Yep.
A lot better. And does it, for some reason, I was thinking about domain-driven design. Does it fit well into that scenario too?
It does.
Mm,
Yeah, very well.
yeah.
I actually am a proponent of at least the design parts of domain-driven design.
Yeah.
Um, it's what's interesting is Eric Evans wrote his domain-driven design book concurrently, and we didn't know each other. Well, we actually still don't really know each other. But he wrote his book at the same time I was writing mine back in the mid '90s,
Mm,
and the original COM version of CSLA. And so independently, you know, so his implementation details, if you look at his book, are pretty fundamentally different in some ways from the implementation details of CSLA. But the way I love the way that he describes talking to the end user, breaking down complex problems into smaller subdomains, and the whole analysis and collaboration with the end user type approach is fantastic
wow.
and works really well with CSLA. So
That's
yes,
great. Yeah. So I hope everybody out there checks it out. And now I'm thinking about where I can use it because next time I'm on a big project, I'm definitely going to look into CSLA. That's for sure. Um, uh, yeah. So any other final thoughts before we go? We got to go in a couple minutes. Um,
yeah, I guess the only thing I would close around the CSLA thing is just a quick reminder that it's open source.
yeah.
Over the years, a lot of people have contributed small things, and some folks have contributed some very, very big things, to the framework. And so like all open source, it relies heavily on having an active community, and it is. There's a nice community, a lot of folks that are using it and have used it over the years, and are happy to answer questions. The community has moved in different places, but these days it's in GitHub discussions, and so it's easy to find, off the GitHub site. And so, yeah, I just strongly encourage folks that are interested to come into the forum or come on our Discord and ask questions and kind of check it out.
Yeah. Cool. Are you have you checked out .NET 8 yet? I'm probably sure you have.
I just really starting to.
Mm,
Yeah, there's a lot of cool stuff coming in Blazor, a
yeah.
lot of really cool stuff coming in
Yeah.
Blazor for
I
.NET
know.
8,
Yeah.
and so. But I've been, yeah, I was very focused on other things until just recently, and so I've got the .NET 8 preview installed, and I've been dabbling with it, and I really expect over the next 2 or 3 months to dive in pretty deep.
Yeah, great. I just installed it today.
Yep, yep.
Because I'm going to Copenhagen and I want to, for the first time, show them results, in my code,
Mhm.
because I'm doing my code performance talk there.
Oh, yep.
And so I want to show them results from, that include .NET 8, when I go there. So I just downloaded it today, and I looked at, I just need to do one little change to my benchmark.net project, and I'll be able to run all that stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that's so. And you mentioned MADS earlier in
Yeah.
this program. Yeah, and one of the things that's so fun about this, new versions of C# and new versions of .NET, something that might have been a performance issue in .NET 6 might not be anymore, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the amount of work that they're putting into improving performance is just phenomenal, and I
Yeah.
love it because we get it all for free, basically,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. They, when Stephen Tobe was on my show, I said, I think I asked him, what did you guys do between 5 and 6? Because performance is just
Mhm.
remarkably better, from 5 to 6. I was shocked.
Yep.
The differences, the huge differences I saw. And, I continuously look at 7, and now, this weekend I'll start looking at 8. and some things slipped a little bit in 7 for some reason, but
Mhm.
I didn't really, 7 is not a long-term support, so I'm not, really worried about it too much. I'm more worried about the, the long-term support
Right.
versions. So, yeah.
Right.
So the last question I'm going to ask you, because I already asked you the question the first time you were on, is a new question I'm asking people at the end of each episode now. And that is, what brings you happiness in your tech career besides income?
For me, that answer is pretty easy. I get a great deal of enjoyment out of seeing other people succeed.
Mhm.
And so over the years, working on CSLA and the books that I've written, and speaking at conferences, all the different things, and having people come up, years later sometimes and say, "Hey, I just want to thank you because I read your book, or I watched this, or whatever it is, and it made my life better in some way." I'm like, that is fantastic, right?
Yes, I
Um,
love those moments.
I just, and like I said, I was fortunate. I had people early in my career. Some of them I worked for. Some of them were just other people in I guess before open source, but what became the open source community that I was able to draw inspiration or learn from. And so I, in a sense, am hopefully paying it forward. But that, yeah, to me, that's the bread and butter here. That's really
Yeah,
what makes it fun.
yeah, that's for me too. It's when you were saying that, I was thinking, yeah, I just work so I can go help other people. Really, that's because I love helping people more than I love working, really. And so working pays the bills. All the other stuff that I do, that's what I enjoy, right? Doing this show, books, conferences, teaching at the university, and those are the things I love doing the
Yep,
most. Yeah.
yep, absolutely.
Well, that's a great answer, and I'm really great. I'm really happy you came back on the show. It's been a long time, and I miss hanging out with you all.
Likewise.
I'm going to see Carl in a couple months, so I'm really happy about that. But I wanted to make sure you always have a home on this show. If you ever want to come on and talk about anything like the next big release of CSLA or anything else you want to talk about, just feel free to reach out, and I'll book you on the show as soon as I can get you on.
Well, I really appreciate that, and I appreciate being invited back. This is really enjoyable, and I love talking to you. So thank you.
Great. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time.
Yep. Bye.
Yeah, bye-bye. Well, that was a really fun episode, everyone. I love talking to the people I've known for a long time and have a really good relationship. And Rocky is one of those people, because he's such a freaking nice guy, And so if you want to go check out CSLA and even contribute, don't be afraid. He's not going to bite your head off. He's a super nice guy, and I can't wait to have him back on the show again. And I hope you can't wait to have him back on the show again. All right. A lot of that I was just talking about performance, and a lot of my book I've put online now behind a subscription service. And so if you do want to check out the latest performance things, and I'll be updating, these articles before I update my book. And so I definitely recommend going to that URL there, signing up for the service, and you'll be able to read all these articles whenever you want for a really, really low fee. It's really cheap. And so I hope you go check it out or buy the book, one or the other. I saw this. I don't remember who posted it, but I thought this was hilarious. So Rocky and I didn't get to talk about ChatGPT. I kind of wanted to for a second, but Copilot, I am your father. So those of you who've been around long enough to know who Clippy is, I thought that was pretty funny. All right. We still have to think about our friends in the UK, UK, and in the in the Ukraine, unfortunately, because everything going on there. So, please send your thoughts and prayers to them so we can get over this and move on. And so I can go back to Ukraine and speak again, because I really want to go back while I'm still a software engineer. And also, as every week, I hope you will help me help the kids from the slums in Delhi, India, by donating whatever you can to any of those URLs. You can go directly to thevoiceofslum.org, and you can not only give them money, but you can also buy supplies for the kids, everything from clothing to school supplies and even personal hygiene items you can buy for the kids. These are pictures from when I was there last October as part of the CSharpCorner conference. And there's us with the kids. There's me with the two founders of Voice of Slum. And so I hope you will help me help the kids by going there and donating whatever you can, whatever that is, even if it's just enough for a cup of coffee. I'm sure they'll be appreciative. And I will too. So in July 8th will be our next show with Safia. So I'm excited about that. Also, as always, make sure you go help your fellow human by going and donating blood now, because all the blood banks are in shortages in America right now. And I donated last week. I'm over 16 gallons now. I'm getting close to 17. I'm really proud of that. And I donate every month. And so if I can spend 2 hours on a machine every month, you can spend 30 minutes every 8 weeks donating and playing blood. So go do it now, and let me know how you like it. My son just texted me this week going, "Dad, I think I'm going to donate blood because I heard it's good for your health." And I go, "Yes." So there you go. As always, if you have any suggestions, comments, who you want me to invite as my guest on the show, please feel free to reach out to Rockin The Code World at CSharpCorner.com, and I'll get to those requests as soon as I can. And with that, I'll see you on July 8th.